Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. Yes, we are recording these back to back. We don't typically do this. So for those of you already thinking, oh, why does he have the same shirt on? Well, it's the same day, and Nick has the same shirt on as well. Shout out Church Street Bagels. Go shout out my boy Frankie Bagels. Go get a bagel from there. Go get an egg sandwich. Get the Chipotle melt. You won't regret it. Line was apparently out the door the other day. One of our listeners said they tried to go, and the line was they couldn't. The line was out the door. That's a good sign for good business, if you ask me. But you got to check it out for yourselves, and you let me know. And again, if you go in there, tell them you know Dan Schneider. All right, tell them you know. Actually, tell them you know explanation Dan. They'll know it. He'll know
Explanation Dan. I might need an explanation on this nickname.
It's a poker nickname, but it's somewhat self-explanatory. I like to explain things a lot, especially
Really?
poker hands. Yeah. I like to talk. I like to hear the sound of my own voice. What a shocker! I'm a podcaster. But anyway, Nick, we're here today to talk about the Giants' defense on the All-22 film against the none only San Francisco 49ers. It's not good. It's not good. Okay. I feel like it's a little bit better than the offensive film, but it's overall not good, Nick. I want to start with a positive, though. I was definitely, and I saw you wrote this in your notes too, Nick. I was definitely happy to see Wink Martindale have a more aggressive approach in this game than he had against the Arizona Cardinals. And he did. He blitzed Brock Purdy, I think close to 84% of the time he sent extra pass rushers in this game, Nick?
I think it was, just on the pass. It was like 86% of Brock Purdy's dropbacks.
Yeah. And he came out with, according to True Media, 15.4% of the snaps in cover zero, which is something we didn't see a lot of last week, and 19.1% of the snaps in cover one. So definitely a bit of an aggressive game plan, Nick. 53.8% zone, 34.6% man. Maybe you want to start there, Nick, with the two things I brought up. One, what were your thoughts on the more aggressive approach, blitzing Brock Purdy? I felt like it worked really well in the red zone. And then two, we're playing a lot more zone than I think that we expected the Giants to play this year. What are your thoughts on that?
First off, Kyle Shanahan is an absolute genius and so fun to watch. Having George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, all that, it's just it would be fun to cover an offense like that. I'll say that much. And I do like the New York Giants offense. I'm not trying to take shots at him, but holy crap, he's a wizard with that personnel. In terms of the pressure, I absolutely love it. The Giants were outmatched on offense. You can argue they were outmatched on defense. I would make that argument. So try to dictate. Pressure breaks pipes. And you can make the argument, Dan, that it worked early in the game because Brock Purdy, to me, early in that game was off almost through an interception to Deonte Banks, almost through an interception to Adoree Jackson if it wasn't for George Kittle knocking the pass away. So just try to accelerate that kid's clock. But I got to say, the kid has a very good release. I think he did a very good job releasing the football right before the pressure actually got home in time, in rhythm to his weapons who were able to create yards after the catch to an annoying rate. Just to be honest, it was really bad. But man and zone, I just think the Giants, they were running a lot of man blitzes with the cover zero look. Zone coverage, it's just a lot of cover three to keep a net over the top. You don't want to run a lot of man coverage when you're losing in man coverage against guys like George Kittle and against players like Deebo Samuel who are so good at breaking one tackle. So you just give yourself a little bit more of a safety net to have zone defenders. I think that's one reason why. And a lot of it's just three match anyways. So it ends up devolving into man coverage once those routes are distributed. So that's where I think we see at least what is it, zone or man? It ends up kind of being man, but it might be written down on paper as zone.
I think that's fair. And I think that's something that sometimes True Media misses. Maybe I want to talk about the first point you made, Brock Purdy. I was definitely impressed with him in this game on tape, considering how often he was blitzed. I think one thing Purdy does well, and this doesn't often get talked about, something Tua does well also, the way they kind of manipulate the pocket in the sense of just not wasting any steps and always understanding like where to shuffle to get to the throwing point, to get to the point where they can find their foundation, find their landmark to throw from, and then throw the football. I think it was best shown on the touchdown pass he had to the undrafted or the 7th round pick out of Michigan. I'm forgetting his name, the one against Deonte Banks, Ronnie Bell. I just thought he did such a good job of that slide left, find that spot to throw with the pressure coming right at him from the A-gap, and just the anticipation on that throw and also the lead on that throw. I mean, he throws that ball into space away from the coverage. I just thought it was so well done on that play. A few other plays definitely stood out to that regard as well. I think he processes really good for a second-year player. And I think what it comes down to also is that release. And that's something natural for a lot of these quarterbacks. Tua has it as well. It's that quick release, the ability, like the throwing motion isn't as much of a loop or isn't as much of an over the top. It's just kind of that quick rip. And it worked really well against the Giants in this game because the 49ers had a lot of solutions for the blitzing. And when you're blitzing a team like this, eventually they're going to throw a screen. And the 49ers threw 2 really successful screens in this game, Nick. But one thing that continues to bother me and plague me a little bit about this Giants defense as I continue to watch more tape of them is I feel like the second level, Bobby Okereke specifically, and you can throw in McFadden to this as well, but mostly Okereke, they're just so slow to react to everything. Everything just feels like slow motion. And it feels like, when Okereke is trying to come over that screen, he's getting washed or he's not making it in time. And there's so few plays of him. And there are some plays of it, but there's so few plays of him aggressively attacking a gap or, this defense dictating in that way. It just seems like they're on their heels a lot at that second level. And I don't see that from the 49ers second level. I know it's the best second level in football. I get it, but I'm looking at them as the, what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to be, the model example. And then our example I'm looking at, and it leads me to believe, man, at this point and I'll ask you about the two big additions we made because I thought the other one had a very disappointing game as well and a tougher matchup for sure. A'Shawn Robinson, I've been incredibly disappointed with him so far. I mean, they paid him $8 million. I thought he was going to be a really good trench player. But it leads me to question, Nick, what are your thoughts so far on what we've gotten out of Okereke and A'Shawn Robinson this year? Because it's been a little disappointing, to say the least.
A little disappointing would be mild. The Giants struggle to fit counter. That's something that we've gone over how many times on this damn podcast. Too many to mention. Well, what team runs GH counter very well? A team that doesn't even run it all that often, the San Francisco 49ers. So they were running GH counter. They were running so many just creative things. I swear the combo blocks with George Kittle and Trent Williams, you could just write it home. It's just textbook type material. And then how they use the jet motioning player to lead block to help uproot the end man on the line of scrimmage. All the stuff that they do, it's going to throw off those second level defenders. And the way the Giants and Wink Martindale tasked these second level defenders to play GH counter because they know it's a liability, they just ran Bobby Okereke right to the run fit every single time to blow everything up and to spill it. So Kyle Shanahan got that in his head. Second drive, they run a play action off of that, hit a big play off of a dig. And they just kept pulling their linemen. And basically, because the Giants would employ these tight fronts where you have a nose and then you have 2-4 techniques. When they ran these play action type passes, they would kick their backside guard over, looking like it's going to be a pulling type of play, to block Kayvon Thibodeau, Jahad Ward, or whoever it was, and have Trent Williams just take the 4 technique, which he dominated. And a lot of the times it was Robinson. And look, A'Shawn Robinson, he got punched in the face by Trent Williams. You can argue that Trent Williams should have been kicked out of the game. That was the least disrespectful thing that Trent Williams did to A'Shawn Robinson in the game. I'm not lying. Like, it was that bad. Trent Williams was throwing him around. There were times throughout the film where I just saw Giant defenders just on the ground, just getting tossed. They were absolutely out physicaled in this game. Like, what's the best way to put that? Because I feel like that's a clunky way to phrase it. They were just out muscled.
Yeah. I like out physicaled. I know it's not technically a word, but I think that's the best way to describe it.
But dude, you just watch the tape and you're just like, they're just getting pushed around up front. And then when Deebo Samuel or George Kittle caught the football, they just couldn't get those guys on the ground. It was a very demoralizing type of loss from the defensive standpoint. I get you're outmatched, but when you're just getting bitched at the point of attack, there does come a time where you're like, bro, like, has this defense actually improved? I get that we added people, right? Is it actually improved? I think it still is.
On paper, it has improved. On the reality of the film is it's definitely not an improved defense. I'm still trying to figure out why it's taken such a step
opponent.
back.
I think the opponent. That's what I'm going to hope for. But if it's similar against Seattle,
against Arizona.
No, that's true. But Arizona might be low-key
they might weirdly be able to run block. I don't know how or why, but they are able to run block somehow.
Some of the plays too were very fun. I actually like watching some of that kind of stuff on film. But the Giants, they just it's too much to handle. When you already have those type of liabilities, I can't fit this, and then you overcompensate to fit it, and they run something off of it, which is just what Kyle Shanahan does from drive to drive, and how they marry their run looks and their play action looks. It looks the freaking same. Giants were chasing. There were so many plays where the Giants would step to the run and then George Kittle is out to the flat, wide open, nobody on him. And I think Micah McFadden had a very good football game, and we'll get into him and we'll run through some of his plays. But even with the tackles that he made, he's the leading tackler on the Giants. He had like 3 pretty bad missed tackles at the same time, just to put everything into context a little bit. But McFadden is still looking on tape, and I know they're different roles, Dan, much better and much more decisive than Bobby Okereke.
I know.
That's upsetting.
That's the part that is upsetting, yes. Bobby Okereke has had a really upsetting start to his Giants career. I thought, if we're going to be completely honest, and there was a little bit of projection coming over, right? Like he was assumed to play this role that they have for him, that Wink Martindale pinpoints, oh, I need a speedy linebacker. I want someone like this for my defense. But speedy is good. You know what else is good? Decisiveness and instincts at the linebacker position. I'm not questioning Bobby Okereke's instincts to that extent, but I am saying that it has looked like Micah McFadden has been more decisive. Like you even asked Carl Banks last week. I talked to him a little bit about this from the week 2 tape, and he was trying to make the case that, like, look, the issue with McFadden is he's actually reading things out right, but he's just been a little undecisive, a little slow, or just missing tackles. And you just brought that up. He's missed tackles in this game as well. But I don't think that issue the issue with Bobby Okereke is even, a little bit worse. And one thing I asked, remember the play that we went over that you said you didn't know what Bobby Okereke was doing last week, the red zone touchdown for James Conner?
Yeah.
He made the case on my Twitter that like that wasn't as much on McFadden or on, I forget who else it was, the guy who lost the left guard. I'm forgetting which team. Jihad Ward. And I asked him, what about 58? And he said, good question, type of thing. Like, we don't know. And a lot of what I feel like we've seen with Bobby Okereke has been this indecisiveness and this slowness at that second level. One of those screenplays, it's like you just see him flowing over to try to make the play, and he's not ever move. It doesn't even really ever look like he's moving that fast to me, Nick. I guess that's the best way to describe it. And he had a couple tackles for loss, I think, last week. So those plays for sure, he looked like it. But we need to see more of that decisiveness and that aggressiveness from Okereke.
Some of those tackles for a loss were also just him shooting the gap based on the GH. You read your run keys, then you react. And that's how the run keys got used against the Giants later in the game off of play action. But I kind of made that case in week 2 as well. And I got, my asshole ripped apart for saying Micah McFadden looked good, but he was in position a lot of the times. But he's just, I don't know, like there are some athletic capabilities that I think are a little bit limited with Micah McFadden, but he had a hell of a game. He had a hell of a game, and we're running through some of the plays.
We did such a good job of stop. We for a while had done a great job of not cursing on this podcast. Yeah. And I feel like we've totally regressed as a duo in the last like 2 or 3 I think it's partially because the Giants are getting their butts kicked, and I tried to be a little fan friendly, a little kid friendly there. I know some of you listen with your kids around, so we do apologize to some extent. We'll try our best, but sometimes in the heat of the moment you might hear something.
Dude, speaking of hearing something, my dog's barking, so he obviously doesn't like us cursing. But watch A'Shawn Robinson even on this play. I get that he's like moving to the play side to restrict it, but just like that's not maybe the best example, but that's just the Giants were just getting manhandled up front, and that's not what we expect. Other than Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, who we'll go over, but those are the 2 guys we don't expect to get manhandled. Like Dexter Lawrence, again, I get it. He's not getting the sacks. Looks fine on tape. I'm not worried about Dexter Lawrence whatsoever. I thought Leonard Williams had a great bounce back game. But where is A'Shawn Robinson? Where is Raheem Nunez-Roches? Where is Kayvon Thibodeau? Where is Boogie Basham? Where are these players, man? They're just not showing up.
You're right. A'Shawn Robinson, incredibly disappointing on tape this game. And I will say this, and we'll get to more of it later, but I want to tease it now. I was really, really relieved and pleased with how good of a game Leonard Williams had. Leonard Williams looked a lot more like the player we thought he could be this year in this game than he did in week 2, which I thought was the worst tape he's ever put together as a Giants player since joining this team. And I think he kind of felt that way too, given how well he played in week 3. Because this was a tougher matchup, right? You go against this absolutely crap. I'm not going to say the SHIT word, but then hopefully your kid can't spell. But we go against this absolutely crap Cardinals interior offensive line. I'm talking crap. Like the 3 guys they trotted out. It might not be somehow, but like, and you're right, Nick. Like but you look at those names, and these are like all undrafted guys. And Will Hernandez is like a former 2nd-round bust. And like, I get it. Maybe it might not be somehow because they did play against the Cowboys. But like, it didn't even look like it was a matchup issue for Leonard Williams to me. It looked like it was more of just a him issue. And then he comes out with his hair on fire in this game. So I want to give him a lot of credit. I criticized him a lot last week. I was incredibly frustrated with his play, but this week he had one of the best games on film. So we'll get more into that, but I wanted to say that to start, Nick.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up some Lenny plays. I think I have them individually cut, but here's one of them if people want to see. Just so active with his hands. Because again, this is a 305 pounds, 6'5" individual, and he's moving very quick here. And watch how he uses his hands to just break the contact of Aaron Banks, work to the half man, get hip to hip, and then dip that inside shoulder and get right into the pocket to deliver a hit. And of course, it's still completed. And this is on the play where he took the stupid freaking
flag.
roughing the passer penalty. He does, I guess, land on him, and I get like that's what they're calling that. It's just so difficult to be a defensive player, as we've brought up so many times in this podcast. But you're right, man. He was doing well against the run. He was shedding blocks. He was penetrating. He was doing everything that the Giants asked him to do. He lived up, maybe not to that contract, because you can't really live up to that contract, but he at least played to his potential, which is definitely something that we didn't see through the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we'll get more into that as well, Nick. But before we do that, let's talk about some other things that we saw in this game from the Giants defense. We talked about the coverages they use. I can talk a little bit about the personnel. According to True Media, the Giants were in nickel 31.1% of the time, dime 1.3%, and then according to True Media, a lot of base personnel, which isn't too surprising. 20.5% with 3 down linemen, 46.2% with 4 down linemen, and it's not all that surprising when you consider the matchup here. The 49ers are a run-heavy team, or they have a run personnel-heavy team. They use fullbacks, they use extra tight ends at times. So I wasn't too surprised with that, Nick. I wanted to ask you a little bit, though, about a few other players in this game that I thought at times struggled, specifically in the secondary. The first one I want to start with is Trey Hawkins. I felt like, Nick, this might have been his worst game so far as a rookie. And obviously hasn't even played that much. Week 2, he had his snaps limited. But that 3rd and 8 that he lost on, I just felt like that was a textbook. I think it was the one to Juwan Jennings. He tried to get his hands up and press man, and I just felt like it was a textbook example of some of the things that we've seen these Giants corners struggle with when it comes to landing that jam. And once you miss that, you immediately give up a separation. And on that same play, it was when they dropped Isaiah Simmons into the deep half on a 3rd and 8. And I also wonder, Nick, like, do we need to even get this cute with this type of stuff? Like, I know Wink loves to have one guy deep, and I shouldn't say deep half, into the deep middle. I know he loves to have one guy deep, Nick, but on a 3rd and 8 against Brock Purdy, like, Brock Purdy threw one pass downfield the entire game. It was that Deebo Samuel back shoulder against cover 0. Other than that, like, they beat the Giants without even having to throw downfield. So sometimes I wonder if the coverages are a little too cute. I know I just threw a lot out there. I'm just curious to get your take on those two things.
I think on that play, and this is something that Wink Martindale did a couple different times. We saw Isaiah Simmons drop to depth to be the middle of the field closed post safety. He did that when he was an Arizona Cardinal as well. He just gets very deep. And as you said as well, that's something that he likes. He likes those safeties at depth so they can rally and tackle when he runs man coverage underneath. But the route concept was much more before that. I don't know if it's too cute per se. This is something that Julian Love, this was a role that he executed a lot. It's just you can't lose inside like that if you're Trey Hawkins. Now, I'm wondering, and I don't think this is the case, and I tried to break down this play. Did Trey Hawkins think he had inside help? Judging by how he missed, judging by how he missed, it didn't necessarily seem like it, but it's a possibility because Bobby Okereke is to the inside. But to me, it looks like Okereke's eyes are directly on Christian McCaffrey, and he's just kind of mirroring Christian McCaffrey the whole time. So I'm just looking who else would be that defender who would be trying to get the middle of the field. I think that's actually, no, it's not Okereke. I lied. It's Xavier McKinney. And I'm wondering if I think Xavier McKinney is just on Christian McCaffrey. And if that's the case, then, and honestly, if you look at the throw, Dan, it's just so precise right over the top of Xavier McKinney. Because Trey Hawkins is beat to the inside on this 3rd and 8 play. And this is goes for 24 yards to Juwan Jennings in the first quarter, in the beginning of the first quarter. Trey Hawkins, but that was one of his only bad coverage snaps.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't see much.
The run defense was the bigger issue.
Well, it's the open field tackling and the run defense. But the open field tackling was egregious. People are questioning, oh, that was a business decision. Like, that's not a business decision.
No.
Trey Hawkins III is a tough SOB. Watch his Old Dominion tape. That guy loves a tackle. It was against Elijah Mitchell, who just juked him out of his shoes. And then Deebo Samuel a little bit later on. I think he ended up with 3 or 4 missed tackles in this game. That was problematic. Jason Pinnock, very problematic with the missed tackles. The defensive backs in general were missing way too many tackles to the point where I'm like, this was not happening under Julian Love.
Exactly. That's a good point. You made that case. And look, and I've said it from the past. I remember talking about this with James Betcher defense all the time. This is before we did the pod, Nick. If you have that 3rd level, this was the case with Darian Thompson, and that year they had Thompson and I believe it was Antoine Bethea at like 36 years old. Dave Gettleman signed him at 36. It's a great job, Dave. The year they had those two back there, if you don't have that 3rd level tackling well, like if that 3rd level is taking bad reads to the football, taking bad angles, and then missing tackles, your defense is like shot for the year. It really is. You have no shot. So like, this has to improve from Jason Pinnock. This has to improve from Trey Hawkins. If they want to stay on the field, these guys have to improve their open field tackling.
They must. And I'm wondering what they're going to do against the 11 personnel package of the Seattle Seahawks, where you have DK Metcalf and you have Tyler Lockett and you have JSN. Is Darnay Holmes going to be dressed for that game?
Darnay Holmes, great tackle in this game, showed what he can there, but then held on the play where it should have been an interception. And it's just like, you can't, I think that's going to be a one and done kind of thing for the Giants. Almost like they're going to look at the film and be like, we can't afford to have him out there against JSN, but we'll see. We'll see, I guess.
I mean, you can make the
if Banks is hurt, we may not have an option. So
yeah, exactly. You can make the argument with Banks hurt. You just have to move Adoree Jackson back to the outside and bring Darnay Holmes up. And Cordell Fly is just like, he's not even dressing for some of these games. And it's just like, what the hell's going on with this guy? Is he developing? I don't know. Is he going to play slot? He's going to play outside. Nobody really knows. It's not a great situation in the secondary. And I don't know if we have received any word on the Banks injury, but if Banks misses this game, just take a deep breath. And that's saying this about a rookie. But that's the state of the secondary right now.
But he's played really well. He gave up the touchdown. That wasn't his best play. But outside of that touchdown he gave up, he's played really, really well. And he's been sticky in coverage. And they can't afford to lose that type of player right now. There's been like weirdly no update on this arm injury for Banks. I know he was supposed to go for an MRI. We didn't get results back yet of that. So we'll just have to play that one by ear.
DJ Davidson, too, he went down. And I want to say one thing, and I know we're jumping around, but just talking. Bro, DJ Davidson, the last 2 games, he's the one out there for Jordan Riley. Maybe the Giants don't believe Jordan Riley's up to speed enough. But DJ
Davidson, right?
He looks good. He looked good, and he ended up – it looked bad from the All-22 angle.
That was a fucked up play, too. I did it again. I'm sorry again to the people listening, but that was an effed up play. I don't know if it was a dirty play. Some people say that like he got his arm caught up, which is so hard to know, but it looked bad on film.
Yeah, all the guys' weight, all the guard or the center, whoever it was, his weight like fell right on the elbow, and the elbow bent the wrong way. It was But DJ, man, he's a football player. He had that one. He had a PB. Yeah, the one GH counter play action would have went for a huge play, but DJ Davidson knocked it down at the line of scrimmage. Like the linebackers bit so hard on that. There was just nothing except for a wide open Debo.
And by the way, Nick, look, like the fact that DJ Davidson looked that good on tape, it makes like people are like, oh, it's a depth injury. Don't worry too much about it. Well, if A'Shawn Robinson's playing this bad and if Nacho's not really contributing, it does matter, right? Like at that point, like this is a key piece to your defense because they haven't been playing Dexter and Leo as much. And that's by design. They looked at their last year film. They're like, we can't afford sustain these guys playing that many snaps. So I am a little worried about that. A'Shawn to me is becoming a big problem. Like you're going to give this guy $8 million and he's going to look like this on tape. I get it. The matchup sucks. It's Trent Williams. He's the best left tackle in football. But like you said, he just got bitched at times.
He did. And we cursed again. But I'll say this. He speaks Serbian, apparently, according to I think it was Charlotte Carroll. After the game, they were talking to him about the game, and he just ended up breaking out in Serbian. And I don't even know how they were able to be like, oh, wow, that's Serbian. I would have been like, I speak in some Eastern European shit. Like, I have no idea. But, yeah, it was the defensive line has been a big disappointment, not because of the 2 top dogs. It's the depth that the Giants added. And you're right. Maybe Jordan Riley can be that player now who steps in if DJ Davidson is out for an extended period of time. But I think DJ Davidson, arguably, and I know he's playing a slightly different role and maybe not getting as many snaps as the other 2, he's been the 3rd best defensive lineman on the Giants. Yeah. And that's a huge issue with the addition of Nacho and Robinson.
And you could say that about the entire line. And that's what we can get into next, Kayvon Thibodeau, because, Kayvon Thibodeau had a quote-unquote sack in this game, but you guys saw it right there. That's not much of a sack to me. Right?
And who really deserves a sack on this play?
Right. DJ Davidson.
This
is Davidson's sack as far as I'm concerned. Thibodeau comes in and cleans it up. Good job. He's barely behind the line of scrimmage for a 1-yard loss. Like Thibodeau, man, I know he dropped into coverage a ton in this game, which is just getting weird with how often they're doing that. I guess it's just part of the plan. But, man, I don't go crazy with this, Nick. I told you this before the podcast. I know we especially don't like to put too much weight on this. But it's worth something that his PFF grade is the 3rd worst edge out of 103 people in the entire NFL. I mean, that's an insane, he was never that bad last year, according to their grades. Again, we don't want to make too much of their grades. I find their grades to be pretty subjective for the most part. And I don't love their grading scale, which to me has never really been fully explained or properly explained. And I don't really think there's a good basis behind it. But to some extent, I mean, you could see it on the tape too. He's just not winning a lot and he's just not doing a lot for the Giants.
No, he's not. And we discussed this a little bit earlier, I think in the week with Kayvon Thibodeau. He just, to me, he looks indecisive even on this game tape. We definitely said that in week 2, but he looked indecisive on this game tape. I don't want to say he's out of it because that has a lot of negative connotations, but it does seem like he's going through something mentally. Or there's something there. There's some sort of block where that fire isn't exactly there. And with Kayvon, he doesn't get to that second pass rushing move. He kind of tries to use power or he tries to use speed. And then once he's in a position to where he could really take advantage of a vulnerable tackle because of his natural God-given abilities of getting a tackle off balance or whatever he does, whether it's power or speed, he doesn't employ a secondary move to finish him as they would in Mortal Kombat. That's my problem with Kayvon Thibodeaux. He still has the talent. You could see there's sparks there, but he doesn't have a lot of moves to maximize each one of his reps. And he's just kind of relying on, oh, well, I hope I get this guy off balance with all of my power and then discard him instead of, hey, let me get him off balance with my power and then use a move to separate. He doesn't really have that move to separate. And I don't even know if there's really a pass rush plan there either. So yeah, it hasn't been a good start to the season. Number 5.
And here's a crazy stat, by the way, Nick. This is courtesy of PFF Steve and our lads, David Syverson from our lads. The most pressures through week 3 so far, Nick. Max Crosby, 19, leads the NFL alongside Aiden Hutchinson, who was selected a few picks before Kayvon Thibodeaux with 19, TJ Watt 19, Myles Garrett 18, Micah Parsons 17. The Giants' edges have combined for 9 total.
Jeez, that's even more than I thought it would be.
It is actually more than I thought it would be too. But I also feel like pressures, by the way, like, yes, I believe that pressures are way more important than sacks as a general thought process. But I think pressures to me, Nick, and I know we've gone over this, some things that are considered pressures, I know me and you have a little bit of a qualm with some of what they grade as pressures versus what the film says. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I know Andre Patterson, he has his own way of grading the pressures, and it's probably a little bit more open than what PFF does. I think he would grade more pressures. It's like any kind of alteration to the quarterback is going to be a pressure in his book. And I kind of understand that as well, but I'm not seeing that from the edges. And you're talking about a defensive game plan where you send pressure on 80% of dropbacks. And I know that's going to open up some for Okereke and some for Pinnock and some for all these other defenders, but the edge rushers too, Dan, they need to win those one-on-ones because they've had those one-on-ones schemed up. And I've seen KT get eliminated by tight ends and Kyle Juszczyk and all these types of players. And I just, that can't happen for your 5th overall pick. It just can't.
No, it can't. And the Giants, we've gotten to that point. Look, we're not calling him a bust, and I still think that's way too premature. But we're at the point where we are even ourselves starting to say that we need to see a lot more from Kayvon Thibodeaux. And the questions deserve to be asked at this point.
Yeah, man. So I just ran through a bunch of plays though, and we saw some good coverage from Deonte Banks. He's sticky. He's in the hip pocket of a lot of these players. Yep. I think I went over one of the sacks, which was the Kayvon Thibodeaux one. We broke that down a little bit. We saw Deonte Banks with the PBU in the end zone. That could have been an interception. But man, dude, just to go over the overall, if I had to nail down one theme of this podcast, it's that the 49ers just outmuscled the Giants to a point of embarrassment. And I really saw it on the defensive line outside of Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, which says a lot because we were so excited about those two and the additions that they made. But if we want to get positive at all, Dexter Lawrence looked like Dexter Lawrence in this game. It was a very difficult assignment for the interior of the 49ers offensive line.
I would say that he looked like, kind of feel like he's looked like himself the whole season. I know a lot of Giants fans have taken some exception to that. I just ultimately feel like he's been let down a lot by the players around him, which makes his job even more difficult. But I agree with you. He had a really good game. He had a couple run stops that were just phenomenal that we might have a chance to go over at some point. And I give credit to Leonard Williams. Both those players I thought had great games in this. They were the two Giants defenders. And I'm going to throw Deonte Banks in that mix as well, Nick, because I think until the injury, Banks had one bad rep, of course, the touchdown. But outside of that, it's like you said, sticking coverage, almost had an interception too. But I have one more player I want to get. I'm going to let's keep it on here for now. And we can show this. This is the play I was taught. This is my favorite play of the game from Dexter Lawrence. Like, watch, if you're on the YouTube right now, watch how well he pushes the offensive lineman through the play and then works back toward the cutback. Like, this is just, what are you supposed to do as a 49ers offensive line? When we see this happen to the Giants, this is how we feel. Helpless.
This is an excellent play just from the Giants. It might have been the best run fitting play. It's a zone play, but still like a best played in terms of their run defense, because Dexter Lawrence, man, he's in that front side gap, force the cutback, and then he closes the cutback lane. And A'Shawn Robinson is excellent in backside pursuit on this play. And Micah McFadden is right where he needs to be as well. So that's just all three of them are right in position to make the tackle. This is textbook run defense from the Giants. And if you look to the front side of the play, Kayvon Thibodeau, let's get a little positivity around number 5, little Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon, who just sets this edge very well to the inside. So he just pushes 82 off and presents himself, forcing that cutback lane. So I just think the Giants played this excellently. Unfortunately, a lot of plays they did not execute nearly to this level throughout the game.
And I would say this, Nick, I think overall, I'm curious to get your take on this. Would you say that given the matchup, given that you're facing the best run schemer in the NFL right now, besides maybe Mike McDaniel at this point,
Yeah,
seen
dude,
what's going
what
on
the
over
hell?
there, like,
Yeah.
that's freaking awesome watching that. I watched that whole film this week. That offense looked unbelievable, Nick. That is, in my opinion, he might be better than Shanahan right now, which is crazy to even think about. I mean, he was the run game coordinator, by the way, for the 49ers, so you would expect that maybe as. But, given all that, I feel like the run defense actually wasn't as bad in this game as it was against the Cardinals. I think there was like some notable improvement. You just showed that play. I felt like there were a few plays that were positive. It's just like the consistency. That's what you're getting at. And it's like the consistency just isn't there.
It's the consistency, and it's also just getting your ass kicked at the point of attack, which the Giants, every time they ran to Trent Williams, it was like, oof, like Trent Williams, like putting people down. The only time Trent Williams, I was like, oh, was the time Micah McFadden kind of ran him over and Trent Williams held him and dragged him to the ground a little bit. McFadden's got a little bit more power and push to him than I think we give him credit for.
Yeah.
He hit him and he's low. McFadden's not the biggest guy. And he kind of drove Trent Williams backwards to the point where Williams had to grab a hold of him, and they both ended up tumbling down and falling over. But the play side runs to Trent Williams were where I had a big issue. That
especially,
is just it's Okereke too, man. I know we already touched on it, but
it belongs. We have to touch on it more. I mean, Okereke had another bad game. Okereke to me is just he's just not instinctual for whatever reason right now. I don't know if that's who he is. It's not what he looked like in Indianapolis. I felt like he was better in that system. Maybe it's the system issue right now. He doesn't trust it yet. I don't know. I mean, you could probably tell me better than I could, but I feel like part of what you were saying before also was like, and I know you brought this up to me before the pod, and I've felt this way for a while. I've had a long debate with some friends that, like, in my opinion, it's closer than people think, Kittle versus Kelsey as best tight end in the NFL, because Kittle is essentially an extra offensive lineman. You have a sixth offensive lineman on the field every time he's on the field. Kelsey does not offer anything like that in the run game, anything close to that. Basically, no one does in the NFL now that Gronk has retired. And he also offers something as a receiver, a lot as a receiver. Maybe not as much, obviously not as much as Kelsey, but he's also then doubling as a blocker. Like, it's insane to have that advantage to me. And that was obvious in this game too, as you brought up, and we could both see it on the film. Like, Kittle makes a massive impact. When you have Kittle and Williams on the same side, it's like an auto win for the 49ers, an auto loss for the Giants.
Use check too. Like, how many times did we see
awesome
to the play side, to Trent Williams' side, you line George Kittle right off his ass. They just down block the four technique. Four technique's dead, eliminated. And then use check was used in motion to lead block for Christian McCaffrey. They kept doing that, and it just kept working because use check would just go and take out the edge, and then the edge was eliminated. Now you have Deonte Banks against like Deebo Samuel on the block, and then these safeties who are at the come down to execute their run fit. And to be honest with you, neither McKinney or Pinnock was impressive in terms of tackling in this game.
Not at all. And that's what I wanted to get to next, by the way, Nick. Like, this is the biggest. Because we've talked about my major disappointment feelings and you as well, Okereke and Robinson. They're two biggest free agent signings of the entire offseason, essentially. Now let's talk about someone who we've at times felt like this could be the big piece, a guy that we easily re-signed to a second contract, a guy that can be a major part of the Giants turnaround, a guy who's a captain this year, Xavier McKinney. Where is the magic that once was with Xavier McKinney? When he had that year in Patrick Graham's system, his final year, it was magical, man. He was a hawk in deep coverage. He almost did he lead the NFL in interceptions? He was either one off or he tied for the lead in interceptions in the NFL. And that was despite playing with like nothing on the defense side of the ball. That personnel was horrific that year, in my opinion, outside of McKinney. Like, there was holdovers. Leonard Williams was there, but like, that was not a good team. This defense has more talent, in my opinion. And I haven't seen that same magic out of Xavier McKinney in a long time at this point, Nick. And I'm just like curious what the hell is going on with Xavier McKinney. He's a better player than this, but he's not looking like it.
I think he just aligns too much near the line of scrimmage.
I agree with that.
We applauded that move, right? Like, yeah, he gets the blitz like he did it with Nick Saban. Yippee skippy doo. And we thought it was going to work out. I think it's actually been a net negative.
Yep.
For McKinney.
He's better in coverage.
He's better in coverage. Go over those 5 interceptions from 2021, just remembering some of them. He had the one against Hunter Renfrow in the slot. He drove down. That was a very nice, just diagnosing play. One in center field against the
Hurts.
whoever the
one against Hurts, right?
Yeah, that was a bad throw by Hurts, bad decision.
I
think
throw.
That was middle of the field close, cover 1, or it was cover 3. He worked himself over there to the short side of the field too. Ended up coming down, had a Matt Stafford, or not Matt Stafford, whoever the Rams quarterback was. I don't know if it was Stafford at that point. He ended up getting an interception off like a tip. But they were all in the center field, or they were in the secondary. They weren't near the line of scrimmage. And I like that. I think he's a smart player and how he blitzes and how he gets PBUs. Does a good job there. I don't think it's maximizing his talent though. And I understand that this is a positionless defense, but I do think he's being a little bit underutilized. But at the same time, I say that and I'm like, well, you still should be able to come down with your tackles. I don't have I could pull up his missed tackles from the game. The Giants ended up missing like 16 tackles in this game. McFadden had 3, Hawkins had 3, Pinnock had 3, Okereke had 3, and McKinney had 2. So even even in those situations, you need Xavier McKinney to step up. And I'm just wondering, look, this guy's in a contract year. I don't know what the Giants' plans are long term because he was built up like, hey, this guy could be like a star safety. You know, he ends up having that really good sophomore season. Remember, he had a slow start in his rookie year because he had the injury, didn't come back to the Bengal game. But we haven't seen any sort of progression upward. If anything, it's either stagnated or I don't want to say it went down, but we need to start seeing some ball production and maybe see him more in the back half of the defense because he's not really making that much of an impact near the line of scrimmage. And using him in man coverage, he can do it, but is that the best way to use him? I think I'd rather have him be that post safety rather than Jason Pinnock, but I don't know if Pinnock can be a man covering player either.
That's another, exactly. I don't think
there's another issue with this defense.
There's another issue right there. It's like almost like, are they using him like this out of necessity? But the point being, at this stage of it, Nick, 3 games in, there's no way that we can sit here and say McKinney deserves a second big contract and this is a lock for us, right? We're at the point where, and this was the first screen I was talking about where I just hated Okereke on this. I just thought he was so slow to get over and make a play. This is your guy who's supposed to be making a play on this to stop this from going from 19, in my opinion. He's the guy.
It's not even just that. It's also Pinnock too, man. Sorry to cut you off, but Pinnock gets caught up by Okereke. Watch, Okereke gets blocked by Aaron Banks. And then Pinnock, I don't know why, but he sets to the inside there.
Why is he doing that? That's crazy.
I'm not sure. All your defenders, you want to box Deebo Samuel into Xavier McKinney, Dexter Lawrece. He sets right. That's just a bad move because
force him inside.
Banks can't be the forced player. He's sucked up way too far on the block by 10. So Pinnock, I'm not 100% certain what he's doing there, but that's not the only, this is the first on that drive. This is a 3rd and 15 in the second quarter, 13:48 left. And there's another one I'm going to pull up here in a bit where it's not even like the Giants sent the house. The Giants actually had numbers to make they just didn't freaking make the tackle. And that comes down to execution.
Correct. And that's going to be a bigger issue for the Giants as we have to think about moving forward. As far as the McKinney thing goes, I do have a little bit of regret there just because I remember that whole pre-draft process. I wanted Antoine Winfield so badly, and then McKinney, quote unquote, fell, and it felt like a great value pick. But Winfield's been the clear better player so far at this point in their career. Obviously, McKinney got injured as well, but Winfield's unbelievable back there for Tampa. Yeah,
it looks like on the 3rd and 13, Isaiah Simmons does get held up a little bit.
Yeah, it could have been a hold. They should have probably called a hold here. On, I think it was Banks. Is that Banks out there? I don't know who.
No, it's 70. It's 74. It's not Banks. Okay. But I'm wondering if McKinney, or if Simmons could just flow outside, anticipate this a little bit more with all the linemen around him. Maybe he was a little bit slow to anticipate that this is going to be a screen. It's sold well, but at this point, you got a beeline to the outside, and he gets caught up. But that's also just kind of pulling hairs a little bit. And then there's just no one else to flow over the top to help Simmons out. You have Okereke, who's also late, and he has a lineman in front of him. It's just a well-executed screen, something the Giants know very little to nothing about.
Yeah, somehow, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's been rough. We went through this pod. We're already 40 minutes in, and we've had a lot of negative things to say. The only positives, I think, were McFadden. Sort of, right? Some of the flash plays, but then had some bad plays. Leonard and Dexter, for sure. I mean, they were positives. Then
Deontay's fine, even though he gave up a...
Right. Banks before the injury. But it's not great right now, Nick. That's for certain. Do you have any other plays you want to go over before we get into some awards? We're handing out some superlatives.
I don't have plays per se, but I just wanted to say I loved the game plan. We opened the show with that, the philosophy, the pressure, dictate. But it wasn't even just blitzing. I felt like Wink Martindale was pulling all of the rabbits out of the hats in terms of twists, in terms of the way he was sending pressure. Saw some of the stuff that we saw mid-season against teams like, I'm trying to think of the team that they played before Jacksonville, like Green Bay and Baltimore, where you have basically a double twist with the ends, but they start basically in the A gap, and then they loop around all three of the crashing defensive linemen. It's a longer developing type of twist. But my point in bringing this up is just the amount of pressure and the amount of diversification within the pressure just to try and do something. But the Giants are just outmatched. They're not nearly as talented as a team like the 49ers, unfortunately.
Yeah, you know that it wasn't a good matchup for them, and we'll have to bury that tape just like the Giants did and move on to Seattle for an all-important game. But let's hand out some superlatives, Nick, before we get out of here. I want to start with unheralded player of the game. Who was your pick for unheralded player of the game?
Has to be Leonard Williams. He was everywhere in this matchup against the run, against the pass. Very nice bounce back game from Big Lenny. He has to. Making that much money, you need to have an impact.
Yeah, he gets it for me too, Leonard Williams. I just, like I said earlier, I loved how shot out of a cannon he was in this game. It looked like to me he was playing at a different speed than he was in week 2. How about highest effort player? I think we have the same one here too.
It's Micah McFadden. He was everywhere as well. Just seemed very smart and dialed in. Micah McFadden's issues aren't as much with the instincts anymore. Like we thought that was it from week 2. From the year 1, we saw a bunch of mental processing issues, and we saw maybe a couple plays in week 2, but I didn't see really many at all in this one in terms of fitting the run, in terms of coverage. It was all just athletic limitations and just not breaking down and executing the right tackle technique.
Yep, you nailed that one. How about, and he's my pick as well, how about your favorite play call? I think we might have a different one here.
I just said all the pressure, just the attempt to dictate. It was the overall philosophy, which was my favorite play call.
I like the 3rd and goal from the 10 and 8:53 in the first quarter, the near Banks interception. I just love a good A-gap pressure, and I just thought it was really well executed by the Giants. They knocked Purdy off his spot, forced him to relocate a different landmark to throw from, and the ball was bad ball placement because of it. So I like that one. Best player on film overall. I think we're going to have the same one here.
It's Dexter Lawrence. He was also everywhere and just absolute pain in the ass. Like everybody in the 49ers locker room on offense was probably like celebrating. And then there was this one guy with a bunch of band-aids and bruises and, a black eye. That was whoever was blocking Dexter Lawrence, because he's still getting in there.
You're right. And Dexter Lawrence was my pick as well. I would say Leonard gave him a run for his money. He had a really good game too, but it's going to be Dexter Lawrence for me as well. Players we expected to see more from. This is taking over for what we did last year. Disappointing players. I just think this is framed better. I have a bunch of players here. Okereke playing way too slow for me. McKinney not making plays. Kayvon, I'm throwing in the mix finally. I get it. He drops and covers a lot, but we're just not seeing plays. And then Ashawn Robinson, we've gone over at length. Just a really bad game for him, especially, they paid him $8 million, for a D lineman, interior dude. He was supposed to be a difference maker in my mind in ways that maybe don't show up in the box score, but to the film heads like us, the people who are actually watching the game, he was supposed to be a big trench piece that can really help them win up front, and they get dominated up front. And he's a big reason they were dominated. So that was disappointing to me as well.
Yeah, I was trying to look at his PFF numbers in terms of not just the grades, but he ended up having 1 pressure, and he was actually credited with 5 tackles, but they had to be some of the more nondescript tackles I've ever seen, because there wasn't really any moment other than that play that we went over where it was great play, but that was a collective effort from the New York Giants. We need to see more. And it just seemed like the bad plays were really bad. And maybe that's one reason why he was in his head and ended up kind of throwing some sort of a punch at Williams. And then he ended up getting punched and got punched so hard he started talking Serbian. I have no idea what happened there.
I don't know about that Serbian thing either. That was definitely weird. I didn't even know Ashawn Robinson was Serbian at all, or had any Serbia in him. I know actually I have a couple friends who are Serbian though, so they have a lot of pride in their country. So for sure, I maybe I'll ask them next time what he said. I'll have them translate for me or something like that, Nick. All right, if I can find that clip. Let's do a pass rushing grade 1 through 10. This one's a weird one for me. I have a grade and I saw your grade, but am I basing it do I factor in that they blitzed 84% of the time or whatever, 86% of the time, whatever it was? They got pressure, but it wasn't with wins one-on-one really, except for Leonard Williams twice and some from Dexter Lawrence. So I don't know. Where do you grade this one?
I went with a 4.8, mainly because Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams. But the edges, if I had to grade the edges, even though Kayvon had a sack, it'd probably be a 2.
Yeah, that wasn't a good sack at all by Kayvon. That's not the.
It was it was intelligent just to know that he's going to step up. But he got basically chipped down to the ground by Uage. and Juszczyk released into a route, and then nobody was blocking him. He was just standing there, and then he just went in. Smart play, but a lot of it was just, well, most of it was set up by DJ Davidson winning inside. It's a one-on-one matchup.
Completely agree. I went 4-4 for that one. Similar reasons. Run defense grade. What's your thought there?
I had a 5-2. There were a couple plays. Again, I think just to the play side, that would be of Trent Williams. It would be a lot lower than a 5-2. But overall, I felt like they did a solid job considering the opponent they were going up against. It's just, you hate to see your defensive lineman not named Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams just kind of getting tossed around like we saw with Trent Williams and George Kittle on those combo blocks. Like that's really where I had a big issue. But a 5-2 isn't that bad.
Yeah, it's 5-8 for me, despite the fact that I had issues with what you just went over and the linebacker play. I just thought McFadden had some really heady plays and some really decisive plays, which I liked. I gave him credit for that. There were some run stops I wasn't expecting the Giants got. So 5-8 for me there. All right, Nick, anything else on this?
Yeah, let's do an impromptu open field tackling. What do you have there? A 1-6.
0.7.
Yeah, dude. Oh, geez, the open field tackling. And we didn't even really go over a lot of those plays. They were just horrendous.
We don't want to make people watch those again. That's
horrendous, dude.
Long week. Hopefully some players are coming back, especially on the offense side of the ball. Giants open as favorites against the Seahawks, which is a good sign. Vegas is usually onto it. Man, Nick, we need this win so bad. So stay tuned. Big Blue Banter. It's only Monday. We're recording these both on Monday. Maybe one will drop. Maybe they'll drop Tuesday. I don't know yet, but we'll have some content coming this week to preview what's coming, where the Giants have been at so far, some thoughts on that, and also what's coming up with the Seattle game, because this, again, is going to make or break, in my opinion, the Giants season. Thanks again for tuning in. If you want to help us grow, please make sure you hit the like button on any video you watch ever on YouTube and subscribe. Hit the alert button. Also, if you listen on iTunes or Spotify, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you download, not just play. Download. That's what we need. And if you haven't already, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. We are close to 1,000 ratings, which we were always trying to get to, but like we've been stuck at 934 for a while. I'm looking not a lot of reviews lately, except from None, who said that he thinks the All-22 reviews are too long. I appreciate your criticism, but also there's a lot to talk about, None, and I know some people like the long ones, so it's hard for, there's pluses and minuses to both, but let's get a positive review in there. Let's get a 5-star in there. Someone hit us up, say something you like about the show. Help us grow. Help us get to 1K ratings. I don't know, man. It's not going to take you 2 seconds. I would do it for you. That's all I know. And I think Nick would too. So thank you so much for listening and tuning in again. Have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon, though.